Welcome. Thank you for joining us at today's program featuring Macha Suzuki, presented as part of the Wignell Museum's Home Edition, a series of curated artist talks, workshops, and discussions featuring artists and cultural workers. My name is Rebecca Trawick. I'm the director and curator of the Wignell Museum. The Wignell Museum is a teaching museum and interdisciplinary art space that introduces Chaffey College students, faculty, staff, and community members to innovative contemporary art objects and ideas. By fostering critical thinking, visual literacy, discourse, and empathy, the museum seeks to enhance the intellectual, cultural life of our community. We want to take a moment to recognize that we're situated on the Rancho Cucamonga campus, Chaffey College, which resides on the traditional and unceded lands of the Tongva people. We offer our recognition and respect to the elders, both past, present, and future.
And hello, my name is Roman Stallenwerk. I'm assistant curator at the Wignall Museum of Contemporary Art. Please note we are recording all sessions of Home Edition. When possible, recordings are made available on our website. Visit us at www.chaffey.edu/Wignall to access our full schedule of programs and available recordings. Announcements will post to our email subscribers and social media when new videos are available. All recordings on our site include captions and audio descriptions as options. You can follow us on social media, including Facebook and Instagram at Wignall Museum. We ask that you complete a brief survey after the session at a tinyurl.com/Wignall Spring21 Visitor Survey. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Andy Hadel. I am the preparator at the museum. I'll be assisting Rebecca and Roman in today's Zoom session. In a moment, we'll have Macha Suzuki present for about a half an hour or so, with the remaining time being available for Q&A. Thank you.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Roman. Today, I have the great honor of introducing y'all to Macha Suzuki. We're so glad to have him here today. The Macha was born in Tokyo, Japan in 1979. He immigrated to Los Angeles in 1988. He has an MFA from Claremont Graduate University in sculpture and a BA in studio art with emphases in painting and photography from Azusa Pacific University. Suzuki has exhibited his work regularly for the past 12 years in museums and galleries, nationally and internationally. He was represented by Sam Lee Gallery, Los Angeles for 7 years, where he had 2 solo shows and a 2-person show until it closed its doors in 2013. His other solo exhibitions include Wignell Museum of Contemporary Art, Vincent Price Art Museum, Laguna Art Museum, Gallery Lara Tokyo, Kravitz Welby Gallery in New York City, Cypress Gallery, and Biola University. Suzuki has also taught art and design at various institutions since 2005, and he is currently clinical assistant professor at Loyola Marymount University. He lives and works in Los Angeles, California. So please join me in giving Macha a warm virtual welcome.
Thank you, Rebecca and Roman and Andy, and thank you guys for the years of support. I'm honored to be included in this lineup of this lecture series, and yeah, so I'm going way back in time. This image you're seeing now is from my MFA thesis exhibition. And it's really fun to see so many faces and names that I recognize. So thanks again. So this first piece is from 2007. It's called Fortunately. Mixed media, 28 by 26 by 18 inches. So my wife worked as a caretaker for this elderly woman named Diana, who was fighting Alzheimer's disease. And we got to know her pretty well for the last couple of years of her life. And so my wife was there to kind of help take care of her. When she passed away, her family organized a celebration of life at a restaurant. And for the first time, we met people who knew Diana and who had really amazing stories about her, people who were impacted by her and her life. And, you know, it was just this really rich experience for us. So they all told stories of how great she was and all the accomplishments and what she meant to them. And I realized that, you know, she was so much more than this, just this elderly woman who was, you know, slowly declining. And we got to sort of be blessed by all of the things that we learned about her. This piece is kind of about that and about legacies that we leave behind when we close chapters in life. And as I'm growing older and kind of deeper into my artist career, and as my kids are growing older as well, I'm thinking more about what my legacy might be, you know, for my own work as an artist and also as just a human being. What I want people to remember about me, or what are those stories that they're gonna tell. So so I titled this talk Bedtime Stories of Failure, Macha Suzuki, X's and O's. One of the recurring themes in my work for the past decade or so has been this idea of failure. Not as something that is exclusively negative, but rather as something to be celebrated, as something that will make you wiser, something that will help you to build character, something that will help you to succeed. This is called Minor Threat from 2008, 67 by 115 by 115 inches. It's a slightly larger than life sheep made of cheerleading pom-poms. And it's surrounded by colorful arrows that are suspended from the ceiling. There are two arrows that have pierced the sheep, and instead of bleeding, the coat of the sheep where the arrows have struck is turning into the color of the arrow. So the next moment when all the arrows have hit the sheep, the idea is that instead of it bleeding out and dying, it's going to turn into this really colorful, really sort of iconic, beautiful being, full of color, full of life. Weird. So the arrows represent hardships in life, including moments of failure, which seems to be unavoidable. You often can't control those arrows, what comes your way. But what you can control is the way in which you respond to these arrows. You can let these arrows make you bleed out or knock you down, or you can also allow these arrows to help you become a better version of yourself. You can become wiser, right, through these experiences. You can become more compassionate, more understanding, etc. And these scars become beauty marks that make you more beautiful than you were before. Here's a detail shot of where the arrow strikes the sheep. This piece is called Death and Rebirth from 2009. It's a mixed media, life-size, kind of a dead body self-portrait. So I'm about 5'9" on a good day, so that's about the size of the sculpture. This piece started with a conversation I had with a friend whose wife had just given birth to their first baby, first little boy. And I asked him, I asked my buddy what it was like to anticipate the arrival of this new life. You know, and I just had a lot of questions, like, was it so exciting anticipating it? And he said that yes, it was very exciting, but also at the same time, it was kind of sad. And he explained that he was simultaneously excited for the arrival of the child, but also sad to no longer be this carefree person who had fewer responsibilities. I mean, he liked being married with no kids. He had to mourn the loss, right, of his old self, and which I thought was really interesting. And I loved his honesty, and it kind of resonated with me. And I said, you know, I felt that when I got married. On one hand, I was really happy and excited, to spend the rest of my life with my wife. But I also liked being single. I liked being not married. So this piece kind of touches on that sort of that idea. So there's a crack in the chest of the lying figure. And if you look inside, you'll see two hands trying to pry open the chest, like the cavity from the inside. And there's also another face on the inside if you look down into the opening. And the face is kind of trying to squeeze out. And from the open mouth of the face on the inside, the colorful cords are coming out. I wanted to portray the dead body as this really beautiful form because the things we leave behind when big changes occur, sometimes you're leaving good and beautiful things. And the body emerging from within is devoid of any color because even though it represents new and perhaps better, it's still yet to be discovered. It's still unknown. Permission to Fail, 2010, steel wire, aluminum foil, floral tape, yarn, inkjet transparencies, 90 by 116 by 20 inches. So this piece comes out of an observation I had from people in my life, including myself. I realized that people around me were just settling in life, settling for less than what they deserve or less than what they want or less than what they're capable of because of fear of failure. So this piece is a call to you from the universe to fail. Giving yourself permission to fail will allow you to take bigger risks, which will help you to reach bigger successes. You can only understand the true meaning of success when you are able to accept the possibilities of failure. Here's a detail. So the leaves are made out of inkjet transparencies that I just printed on my inkjet printer. In the right lighting, the leaves will cast the color onto the wall. So we've all heard of the saying, if at first you don't succeed, try again. What happens if you don't succeed after that? And then you try it again, but then what happens if you still don't succeed? I guess you try again, right? And you keep going through this endless cycle of trying and failing. If you keep trying and missing, eventually that repetition starts to hold value. It starts to mean something. This piece is called Nice Try from 2010, MDF wooden dowels enamel paint, 45.5 by 45.5 by 21 inches. It recognizes that life is not always about hitting the bullseye. It's often about the effort and the desire to hit the bullseye and the things you gain from missing the bullseye. It's about the journey rather than the destination. So this is a target where none of the arrows have hit the mark. Instead, the arrows make kind of this beautiful radial design. As a target practice, it's a complete failure. But as an object, it's perhaps more beautiful because of the failure. This is a piece called Blessings in the Skies. See what I did there? From 2010. MDF epoxy clay enamel paint, lights, 5.5 by 43 by 21 inches. So as you know, living in and around LA, you've hit a lot of traffic. And this piece started with, it starts with a story. My wife and I were stuck in traffic, in rush hour traffic, trying to get out of LA. We were on the 101 heading north. We were trying to catch a concert in Santa Barbara. And we were arguing about something, and there was just a lot of tension in the car. We were both irritated that we weren't moving. And off in the distance, ahead of us, I see this little tiny line in the sky. And as time went on, it just started to get bigger and bigger. And we realized that it was a formation of birds that were approaching us from way far away. And it probably took like a minute for the birds to fly over us. But during that minute, we were just mesmerized by what we were seeing. It was just this perfect line of birds. And during that minute, we just kind of stopped. We stopped arguing. We stopped, feeling bad about ourselves, and we just sort of let this thing happen and let us be blessed by it. And once the birds flew over us, like, we were good. We weren't arguing anymore. It just changed the whole mood. So I guess, this is a piece that is about not being able to do life all alone, accepting the fact that you need to rely on others to fly, and they need to rely on you as well. It's about imperfect people supporting one another to elevate each other. So there are colored lights inside of the bodies of the birds that illuminate the ceiling with this blue light, and it's supposed to reference the sky. This piece is called Lost Again, from 2012, made out of fiberglass, 5 3/8 by 67 by 2.5 inches. I carved a piece of 4 by 6 and then made a silicone mold of it. And then I cast it in fiberglass and resin. So it looks like wood, even up close. I was thinking about those wood carvers you would see at Six Flags or county fairs that make really cool wooden signs that you can put in your house as decoration. And usually people put their names or words like family or love or home, something cheesy, right? But this is kind of my version of it. So maybe at first glance, it may look like a defeatist idea. It says lost again. But the phrase lost again has a few undertones that I really like. Lost again means that this isn't the first time you've lost. It means that you fought again, even though you've already experienced that loss in the past. Sometimes somehow you muster up the courage, right, to go out and fight, even though you know what it's like to lose. And that means something. That perseverance is something to be proud of. So this piece is a reminder that there's no shame in fighting a good fight and losing. In fact, it's a virtue. This is called Still Burning from 2012. Cast ground limestone, resin, enamel paint, colored light, 8.5 by 30 by 30 inches. So similar process to the previous piece. I took a couple of fire logs and I set it on fire on one side, kind of let it burn. And then I put it out and I made a mold and casted them. So it's only 2 different fire logs that have been casted and it's repeated. So it kind of gives it this artificial feel. Kind of like how like old 8-bit video games, all the trees look the same, that kind of artificiality. So this comes out of a time when I was experiencing burnout in life. I just didn't want to do it anymore, whatever it was. When everything seemed to fall apart, recognizing that there was still embers waiting to be fanned. So it's about hope in the midst of despair. It's about choosing to believe that better days are ahead. This is called Huddle from 2012, mixed media. So these are 11 life-size self-portraits cast in packaging tape and clothed in clothes that I would wear. So they look like me. So when I became a parent in 2011, I immediately became this person with different new roles, right? That I had never assumed in the past. All of a sudden, I was a protector of my kid, provider, a teacher, nurturer, et cetera, et cetera. My entire life changed. And if you've had kids, you must know what it's like. Right? So this is a piece that touches on that. So even in making everyday decisions in my life, I was considering first the well-being of my daughter. And so this piece portrays my decision-making process. It's a portrayal of myself split into my new roles as different, wearing like different hats, right? And they're consulting each other in a huddle, or maybe even a prayer circle. There's a quarterback figure in blue who's holding a clipboard. And in the clipboard is a drawing that my daughter made when she was just a baby still. So it's just, these like lines and marks that she made, right? And the 11 are, like seriously putting their heads together, trying to figure out and decipher what the drawing is all about in order to form a plan, right? To inform their next move. This is called This Is the End from 2012. Fiberglass resin enamel paint, 36 by 24 by 3 inches. So I had a show at Laguna Art Museum in 2012. And if you remember, it was the year that the Mayan calendar was going to end. And so there was a lot of talk about the end of the world. And when I was given the show schedule from the museum, I noticed that my show spanned through the end of the world date. Like my show ended after the world ended, which I thought was so funny. And I mean, I still think it's funny. And so I started thinking a lot about the end, right? The end of the world, the end of something. And I started making work that sort of dealt with that idea. This was one of them. And it also kind of became the working title for the exhibition. But, I'm thinking about the end as, a beginning of something new. This is a piece called Halo. It's spelled H-E-Y, L-O-W. It's a play on word. Mixed media on wood, 60 by 60 inches from 2014. I call this my landscape painting. The halo is made up of tiny sheep walking in a big circle. So this piece is kind of about experiencing low points in life and how at the time you're going through it, all you can do is maybe focus on taking one step after another, hoping you're going in the right direction. Yet sometimes it feels like you're just walking in circles. Later on in life, you look back at this season of struggle and realize that the hardship that you experienced was essential in order for you to become who you've become. And suddenly this season becomes one that is really important, maybe even sacred to you. One that was necessary for you to become who you've become. This is an untitled piece. It's a piece of leather, stained and carved from 2014, 57 by 36 inches. So my work deals with my own experiences and stories from my own life. So sometimes they portray my family. My daughter was born in the year of the rabbit, my son in the year of the snake. So the rabbit and the snake are working together in this image, protecting each other, doing life together, taking on the world out there. And it's kind of what every parent hopes for, right? I think. Here's another of that series. So when I was in elementary school, we made these drawings on distressed brown paper bags, torn and stained to look like animal hide. And I was taught that Native American people would make these drawings on animal hide to record their life. So this is sort of my version of it, kind of recording my family, my life, what's going on. Right? Here's a detail of the carving. So it's there. I have this. It's a leather tooling tool that kind of gouges out the surface of the leather. This is a piece called F- from 2015, mixed media on wood, 12 by 12 inches. So I teach at Loyola Marymount University. And I often joke with my students about the F- grade. I haven't done it in a while because it's kind of sensitive, I think. So I don't joke about their grades. But whenever they do something silly or, something messed up, jokingly, I tell them that I'm going to give them an F-, which is not a thing. So this piece is about drawing life from those moments of failure, recognizing that there are many things to be gained from those moments. They're F- shaped ponds, or puddles rather, and the sheep are being nourished by the water in them. This piece is called This Is Our Prayer. In parentheses, we're leaving together, from 2017. Mixed media and a church pew, 60.5 by 34 by 32 inches. This piece started with an email from the church I was going to. So they were remodeling. They were going from pews, traditional pews, to chairs in their main sanctuary, so that they can accommodate more events. So they were trying to get rid of these pews, and they tried to sell them first, I think, and nobody wanted them. They tried to give them away, and it was hard to get rid of them. So they were saying, did an email blast saying anybody who wants it can take one. And I contemplated, I went back and forth, but then I decided not to take it. And then another email came weeks later saying, okay, we have just one left. Any takers? So I was like, okay, I'll take it. Really not knowing what to do with it. So it just sat in my studio for months, actually. But I had a chance to kind of sit with it and think about it, think about what I wanted to do with it. And I started thinking about the history of this object, of the pew, and what it meant to people over the decades that it existed in this space of worship. And I started thinking about all the prayers and songs of worship and sermons and conversations that this pew had been a part of. So I wanted to have an element of sound, right? And that kind of became important to me. And this was right after Donald Trump had been elected to be the next president. And, there was a lot of frustration and confusion among, my friends and sort of my group of, my tribe, if you will. And all the accumulation of all the prayers and all that frustration, state of our nation at the time, I felt like the element of sound had to be a universally familiar and powerful anthem that we could all relate to. So then the only choice for me was to pick this song, The Final Countdown by Europe, which is the 80s Swedish hair band. So, so this sculpture plays the main riff of that song. So I'm gonna play it. You gotta use your imagination a little bit. So there are these wheels in the back that are turning, and it's motorized, and it interacts with the thing that hits the keys. All right. So this is an untitled piece from 2019. It's a bunch of bottles, glass bottles, and I made this furniture thing for it to go on. It's 44 by 48 by 11 inches. It's a set of Molotov cocktails, and it's also a musical instrument that you can actually play. So the bottles have contact mics attached to them, and you can plug it into an amp and actually play it. And I don't know if I've really figured out how to talk about this piece, or even what it's supposed to be really about. I'm trying not to censor my ideas these days. So sometimes I make things that aren't fully thought through. I think I was thinking about how Molotov cocktails are these weapons, these incendiary weapons used by people who are opposing those with guns. And I think I'm oversimplifying it, but I was thinking about how beautiful that idea of fighting for your rights or fighting for your freedom is. You know, like this desire to fight for what you're yearning for. And I don't, like there's something pure and something beautiful about, not about the device, not about the weapon, not about the violence, but this this yearning for those things, for those desire for freedom, right? I think this is the last piece I'm going to share. It's called Bring on the Storm, also from 2019. Mixed media, 56 by 28.5 by 13.25 inches. So it's obviously referencing or appropriating Duchamp. This is a kinetic sculpture where the wheel of the bicycle is also, it turns, and it's also this never-ending rain stick. So I'll show you a video in a second. So rain sticks are believed to have been invented by indigenous people of Chile and Argentina, and it was believed to bring about rainstorms. And so it was a tool used to plead with the God of the universe, right, to bring on the rain. So this never-ending rain stick sculpture is a stand-in for me to continuously pray. So here's a video of it in action. I didn't have a good video of it. This is my old studio. The tire of the piece is made of like hard plastic piping, and there are steel beads inside that continually moves and makes this rain sound. There's a motor. All right, I think that's all I got for you, and I think that's about half an hour. So I'm gonna stop sharing, and I guess I'll take questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Macha. It's so cool to see your studio behind you and to see your work in galleries and museums and studio spaces as well. So I don't know if I'm gonna be able to articulate this well, but I love the dichotomies in your work. You know, often there's like this sense of humor that's really apparent, but then of course there's also this like deeper level. You're looking at reoccurring themes that are really like serious, vulnerability, death, fear, failure, obviously spiritual concerns. Repeatedly we see the rainbow being used in your color palette. And so I don't know if you you can talk about that, but that
Yeah.
dichotomy.
So I think, I mean, I guess the way that I want my work to function in my own life is that it's a kind of an extension of my life. And so as such, the themes that I deal in my work are themes that I'm directly dealing in my own life. Humor and lightheartedness has always been this great entrance point for me into difficult issues and themes. If you can, like, let's say you're in a conversation that's really heavy, but if you can do it with lightness of heart, with some humor, I think it's always a better experience, I think. And so, even when you're confronting something that's difficult, my approach often is like the first step is to approach it from humor, lightheartedness. I think it's a really great entrance point. Yeah.
Well, it also makes the work more accessible, I think, for folks who maybe it wouldn't be initially otherwise, right? Without that entry point, that humor.
Yeah, I hope so. And I want there to be this kind of a hook, right? I mean, it's hard to talk about difficult issues, but if you can get the viewers to kind of engage with it at a different level, then they might be more willing to engage in those difficult issues, I guess.
Well, and I think you also do that a great deal with your titles, with text in your work. There's like a play on words, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that a similar idea?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think like titles have always been difficult for me. Sometimes I don't title things because I can't come up with a good one. And so the way I see titles is, it ought to be informative, but I also see it as an extension of the work itself. And so, and same thing with the text, right? Text is tricky because, often it already has a meaning that's assigned. So I'm very aware of that and careful with the word choice. I do use a lot of text, I guess.
I see Nathan has his hand up.
Hey, Macha. Thanks so much
Hi,
for
Nathan.
sharing. It's really fun to hear about your work and see it in this manner.
Thank you.
Follow-up question about the humor component. One of the things that I appreciate about your work so much in this talk and seeing it in person is your use of materials and the way that sometimes your materials seem to bypass the ways that we usually think about art and access to that.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if you could make a comment or two about how you're drawn to materials and how you use them.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, similar to word use or humor, I think about accessibility for the viewers, right? So when they see, life-size sheep made out of cheerleading pom-poms, like that's kind of funny, I think, but it's also kind of recognizable. When you walk up to the piece, you might feel the familiarity, or like, seeing cardboard in the work. I think it's another way to sort of connect with, viewers that aren't necessarily artists, right? Like they, when I start using maybe like epoxy clay, people don't know what that is. Like they have no idea. But when they see cardboard, they can point to it and go, oh, I know what that is. Like I know how that works. So again, I think it's an entrance point. And then I also think about, just my own sort of like practicality, right? Like I can't always be spending a ton of money on expensive materials. Cardboard is just around, right? Like things that are available at like hardware stores, they're around and they're not as expensive as fine art materials. oftentimes. And so, it's sort of like really anything goes in terms of materials. I think if I had just a ton of money, right, materials would change in my work.
Thank you.
Thanks much. I appreciate that.
We have some questions popping up in the chat. I want to try to maybe get to a couple of them in order, maybe. And I apologize if I'm saying your name wrong. Sari, I think, has a very practical question here. It says, I wonder how or where do you store your artworks after the exhibition?
Yeah, a really great question, Sari. So I usually try to keep them for a while. If it's like a show at a museum or art center where the purpose isn't to sell the work, they come back to my studio and they sit here for a while, right? This summer I built a storage shed next to my garage, so I have some works in there. But I also recently moved my studio, so I had a much larger space that I was working out of with a lot of storage space. But eventually I have to just kind of, get rid of them, take a hammer to them. Because, like to me, once I make the work, and show it few times, and I've photographed it, like the piece is done. I don't have to hold on to it. That's just a reality that I encountered as I just started making more and more works. I just literally ran out of space, so I had to start, just getting rid of old works and recycle parts and take things apart. But if I'm lucky enough, I can sell them or even give them away. But very few people have room in their home to house larger objects like this.
Well, especially when you work life size, right? Often, right? So Cameron, I saw your hand. Do you have a question?
Yes, I do. Thanks for the good talk and the good work.
Thanks, Cam. Good to see you.
Nice to see you. One of the things I'm wondering about is, as we looked at your work, you went through image by image. It's clear that you spend a lot of attention on crafting these pieces. So it might be sort of common materials, but just real attention to detail. And I wonder if you might just comment on how you think that the work of craft relates to the work of art making. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Cam. I think about that a lot. So especially when I'm working with materials that are recognizable. I mean, I'll go back to cardboard again. If I can sort of heighten the quality, then it creates this sort of kind of a wow factor, I think, especially with materials like cardboard, which is associated with like storage or just like shipping. I mean, the cardboard is usually or almost never the thing that you're taking care of, right? It's the thing that goes on the inside. So if I'm treating cardboard as this sort of valuable material and spending a lot of time in the craft process, I think it really changes the sort of like what people think about cardboard, and that's really what I'm after. I've always strived to make the best quality of anything that I can make. At least on the surface, right? Like if you look on the back, like you'll see all the imperfections. But to me, it's a really kind of I don't know if I can articulate it. Like when a viewer who doesn't know art that well, right, sees work that's made out of something that's very familiar to them, but used in a very different way. A lot of care, a lot of attention to detail. It kind of does something in their head, and it heightens their experience, I think. So that's kind of what I'm after.
Can you talk more about what you said about trying not to censor yourself?
Yeah, Yeah. So what I mean by that, like earlier on in my journey as an artist, I always felt like I needed to have a really good idea before I started working, started making a piece that was going to be a finished piece. So I would spend a lot of time like just thinking about it, tweaking things about it. And sometimes I would get to a point where I just didn't make it because it just never got to that point where it was like good enough. Nowadays, I have like weird ideas that like I kind of have an image in my head, maybe. I'll just start exploring it, not really knowing what it's really about or where it comes from. That's kind of what I mean. So I'm trying not to like censor my own ideas, right? I'm trying to like get it out and just like see if it even works. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But I think for me, that exploration of bad ideas perhaps has been kind of a positive thing. It sort of always leads to something good, something new.
Well, and it also connects to your interest in exploring failure.
Yeah, I
Right?
think so.
Yeah, good. So it looks like Kai and Robert, their questions intersect a bit, asking about who your main audience is, and also Robert says, as a man and creator fully immersed in two cultures, one, how does this duality reflect in your artwork? And two, does your artwork resonate more closely with viewers from America or Japan, if a difference exists at all?
Yeah. So let me answer that one first because I just kind of forgot the first question. Audience, right? Audience. Okay. So my audience, like I've always wanted to have a broad audience. Like anybody that appreciates anything that's visually interesting. It sounds kind of it sounds greedy maybe. But my materials, my processes are designed in that way. I've always wanted to connect with people, not just who are well versed in art, but also people who aren't, right? Like parents of artists, maybe, or friends who don't really know me as an artist, right? So I think I want my materials to reflect that. I want my processes to reflect that. In terms of my my own culture, I think that I do. I'm very aware of my how I'm influenced by the American culture and the Japanese culture, but I'm also I also think of it as this like a hybridized subculture that takes in these different cultures, I guess. So growing up, I was, I lived in Japan for the first 9 years of my life. I grew up watching anime, reading manga, and I still do that. I don't watch anime as much, but I still read manga, and so visual culture at a young age all came from Japan. And at that time, I felt that like Japan, at least where I lived, it was more just generally more committed to like visual aesthetics, I guess, than it was here. And I felt that when I moved here in '88. So that's kind of my background. But since then, I think my all of my or most of my influences, at least in terms of like living life, has come from here. And so yeah, and I don't think about Japanese audience versus American audience. And I, Robert, that's a good question, but I don't have the answer. I only see things the way I see things. So it might be a better question for Japanese viewers. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how they're received.
We have a question from Nina here in the chat. do your personal projects ever inform the ones you assign in the classroom, or do you try to keep your academic life separate from your professional artworks?
Yeah, good question. So yes, it does, Nina. I think I've become an expert at my own work, right? So as such, my processes, my materials are very familiar to me. This thing, right? This thing we're doing in class right now. This is the process that I use for many of my more slick sculptures. So I think I think of it this way: the better artist I become, right, the more I have to teach my students, and so I think my studio practice is really important to the things that I do in the classroom. It informs a lot of what I do in class. So if I stop learning myself, I think it's a disservice to my students. So I often give you or give my students little tips that aren't in how-to guidebooks or it's like from my own experience, right? So like what I'm learning in my process, directly informs how I teach.
Thanks, Macha. I see Stephanie has her hand up. Stephanie, do you want to ask the final question?
Hi, Stephanie.
Hi, how's it going?
All right.
So I had a question related to some of the symbols and themes I see in your work, and you've been making work for a long time, so you have evolved a lot of these themes over previous periods that our country has been going through. And I see interesting symbols and themes related to a kind of transformation of toxic masculine aggression, where like the arrows and the kind of like weaponry and the idea of like winners and losers and things like this get transformed into a more kind of holistic and almost like medicinal, like soulful experience. And then I noticed that you were talking about the last piece, this kind of like Molotov cocktail style piece, and having some kind of like thoughts about it. And I'm just wondering if like maybe over the last 4 years, as like toxic masculine aggression has taken on like a different tenor in our country, and the kind of like feeling of violence that maybe we used to have as being like really far away, and now we have like these insurrections happening in the US Capitol, if those themes are like taking on a different weight or if you're experiencing some of these symbols and themes that you've worked with before, if you're experiencing them in a different way. Sorry, that was a very loose question.
Yeah, no, great discussion topic, I think. I think so. I mean, I think the obviously the last 4 years have been has felt really different, right? So the things that I'm thinking about, the way that I'm living my life has changed, right? So I don't know if I've specifically thought about those ideas that you just mentioned. I haven't really put a lot of thought into how those things have changed, but definitely, right? Like yeah, and I never really equated those like the arrows that you mentioned. I never equated those to like violence per se, right? And I use them more loosely as things that come your way, right? Hardships maybe. But I do think they take on a different meaning nowadays. And again, it's like this is all sort of an extension of what I'm living and what I'm experiencing. And so, yeah, I think so. I mean, and if it's not, I think it'll continue to change. It'll continue to evolve. Yeah, and something that meant one thing years ago may not mean that anymore, and it may not mean what it means now in a few years, right? So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if that doesn't really answer your question, but something to think about, I think.
Well, I see you using the symbols of violence, like they're very symbolic, right? They're things that are like far away from our direct experience, like
Sure.
arrows and Molotov cocktails, which we haven't experienced a lot in
Mhm,
our
mhm.
lifetime in our
Yeah.
in this
Yeah,
country.
and that is actually like a direct, you know, I mean, it's information that I'm getting from whether it's internet, media, or whatever it may be, right? It's not my own experience, but experience as somebody who's consuming these informations. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, I think as the world changes, as our country changes, I think it will inform my work, and I think it will continue to change my work.
Mhm. Cool. Thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Great question, Stephanie. So that sounds like that one's to be continued for sure. Huge thanks to you, Macha, for your generosity today. We're super lucky to spend a little bit of our afternoon with you and learn more about your practice. And thanks to all of you who carved out some time as well. Take care and see you next time.
Thank you all. It was fun.
Thank you.